This is the Self-Taught or Not podcast with
Dylan Israel
and Eric Hanchett, where we teach you the do's and don'ts of software development from two software development professionals, one self-taught and one not.
All right, let's get into it. I don't even want to do this anymore. That's a joke, because today we're talking about burnout, which is sadly and unfortunately a real part of many careers, but a rampant issue in software development.
Burnout, you can detect the burnout when you just start feeling really tired. You don't want to get up. You don't want to do anything anymore. Things that you used to love you just don't love them as much. I don't know. It's just a really bad feeling when you hit that burnout phase.
Yeah, and although it happens in other careers, it's for whatever reason in software development, it's one of the sort of number one plaguing issues with developers who go into the field and then they naturally transition to maybe be a scrum master or a product owner, or to maybe because their love of it has sort of died because of it.
Yeah. I have a story about that. Do you want me to share right now?
No, that's not what this podcast is about. Yeah, man, go ahead, go ahead and share.
Okay, so I was in my last job. I was working on Java development for years and years, and I got to a point where, like, the challenge was not as much as it used to be. I was kind of just going through my pacing every day. It was at times a slow-paced job, so we were kind of just waiting for things to come in, and I definitely thought at one point, like, maybe I should get into a different role other than development. I was thinking about being a manager at one point. I was thinking about joining project management at one point, because now looking back on it, I was just burned out. I was like, I'm not learning anything. I don't love what I'm doing anymore. It wasn't like I know some people get burned out when they just have tons and tons of work and they keep doing the same thing over and over again for a certain period of time. It was almost like that was sort of part of it, but it was almost like, I don't know, I just lost the challenge of going to work and it wasn't as fun anymore.
Yeah, that's understandable, because part of the reason that I love being a developer, and I think a lot of people do, is that it's one of those careers where you're usually doing something new, even if it's just the same thing in a different way. But part of the reason 70% of people on average hate their job, actually hate, not dislike, not kind of neutral, but hate their job, is because they're doing the same thing every single day and they're just ready for it to end. Like, I can't do it anymore. And you can get that way in software where you're just like, all right, I'm doing it again. I'm sick of arguing with people about how to do it this way or that way. And it's you lose a little bit of that enjoyment along the way. I would say for me personally, and I think more commonly what people get burned out on is not sort of the repetition, but sort of the company and maybe the business environment to a degree.
If you feel, well, get into that a little bit more. Yeah. I definitely feel like that's happened to me too.
Yeah, so I think it's happened to 90% of software developers, where being a software engineer is a very unique position. I've talked about this quite frequently, where there are very few people who can do your job. You might have you'll hear a lot of times when in Agile about cross-training and things like that, where, the Scrum you should be able to do the Scrum Master role, you should be able to do the business analyst role, and everyone contributes, and that's a fantastic idea until it comes to them doing the dev role, which then becomes an issue because they can't. And so a lot of responsibility typically lands on the dev. The project manager needs to know what's going on with the ticket. That goes to the dev. QA needs to know how to do the ticket. That goes to the dev. The business analyst doesn't fully understand the requirements and the dev needs to explain it to them. That goes to the dev. It's one of those roles where there's a lot of responsibility, and because of that, you have a lot of things that encroach on your space and add a lot of stress. And naturally, businesses want to get as much out of the developer as possible, and they usually do that by just ridiculous deadlines, by just trying to squeeze them dry.
When you're in a bad organization if that is the norm. It's like, we don't care about, we care about these deadlines. You have to hit them no matter what. here is you're gonna have to work on the weekends. It's gonna be super high stress
Yeah,
environment, and those if you're in an environment like that, try to get out.
yeah, and that's why like the average developer has an 18-month tenure. Like granted millennials in general don't stay at jobs very long, but 18 months is super short, and that could be for a lot of reasons. I think this sort of anxiety and stress revolving around developers is a huge portion of it. Because like I know I've left jobs before 18 months a couple times, and part of it is even if you're very vocal, um, it won't necessarily change the culture. Like I've been at companies and I've had friends at companies who have heard their directors or the people who are pushing these unrealistic deadlines say after the deadline was missed numerous occasions, well, we never really expected you to hit that deadline, but we just wanted to try and get as much work out of you as possible, as if you're just over there tinkering your thumbs, right?
Yeah, we don't expect you to actually make these deadlines. Just go ahead and work your butt off. We're going to tell you that these deadlines should be made, but we don't really. That seems like the wrong way to do things. You don't treat your employees like some kind of product, or I don't know. That doesn't seem right to me.
So here's a crazy thing, and like every company is going to have mistakes. Every company is going to be sort of have good apples and bad apples. But I've had friends tell me about certain people who manage like in Agile and Scrum, you're going to give estimates on tickets where they give an estimate for one ticket, and then the business analyst will go and expand the scope of the ticket and refuse to update the points on the ticket. So it looks like the developer is performing very poorly on this ticket, and will lie that they ever change the story, even if it's in the it's in the change log. But crazy things like this happen, and it's unfortunate because what ends up happening is that I can speak from my own personal experience that when I have left jobs is typically because I want to continue to grow, I want to go get more money, and I've reached a point where you're sick of trying to change the environment and you realize it's not going to change. And so you say, okay, let me go at the very least. Maybe the other place will be just as bad, but at least you get like a 2-3 month honeymoon period where you can recharge that sort of burnout and say, all right, I feel like I can take a breath again, which is how it feels for me when I've been at that, where I'm constantly feel like I'm treading water and I can't take a breath. And the things that I enjoyed to do, like coming home and working on side projects, you just sit down and you're like, God, I don't want to do this shit today.
It's like dating. It's like you're in a bad relationship and you're like it's pretty stressful and things aren't working out right, and you come home, maybe you're living together, or maybe you're just dating and you go on the dates and you can see like, this wasn't what I thought it should be. So then you finally get the courage and you leave them and you go and you meet the new employer, the new person. It's like a honeymoon period in that first 3 months. You're like, oh my God, this is amazing. There's lots of, you guys have lots of fun together and but that 3 months eventually will wear off. Or maybe if you're in a really great relationship, 6 months, 1 year, I don't know. But then you're faced with the reality, like, are you going to run into the same problems you've had at the other job with that other person? Is the same kind of habits are you picking the wrong person? Sometimes you got to look at yourself. Are you picking the wrong employer?
Yep. And
Um,
it's that's part of why when you interview, you're as much interviewing them. Like, don't get me wrong. If you're not a developer and you're struggling getting a job, I understand. But as a developer, you should be interviewing them as much as they should be interviewing you, because you can go get a job. And you may find out down the road that oftentimes you're just trading some problems at your previous job for different problems than the other one, and that may be enough. That may be enough to be like, hey, you know what, man? I traded in the unrealistic deadlines, constant stressing and nagging, but instead I got the constant shifting direction, which is another thing that can burn you out, where it's like, hey, we're working on this. Great. Toss that shit out. We're doing this now. We're doing this. And you naturally get those sort of, you feel like you're never getting anything done. And maybe the business is concerned about that. And when they're making these constant shifts, you don't have enough time oftentimes to deliver what they want anyhow.
Going back for a second, you said about millennials. I heard a theory that millennials have, and since we're in a sort of pretty good job market here, a pretty good job market here in the United States at least, and developers are always in demand, at least good developers are in demand, that a lot of people are going to job interviews and then getting the job and then ghosting. Like they won't even actually make it to the job. I have a story where, because this is a little off topic, but this was a few jobs ago, they actually were hiring 2 or 3 developers,
Hmm.
and they had hired the first one, and they accepted the job offer, and then when they were supposed to make it, like the day before they were supposed to start, they called and said, well, I changed my mind, I don't really want to go. And then they basically just they were done. And a second person, we hired at this company, started. They came to the interview. They were working remotely. They flew up to Reno. They worked. They flew back to wherever they were, and then just slowly they stopped answering questions on Slack. Like like they actually, it was like within a 6-month period. It's like, hey, have you talked to Tony? Like, oh yeah, I messaged him today, but he hasn't messaged me back. Like, that's weird. And then they slowly started missing stand-ups, and to the point like they had missed like 2 or 3 weeks of stand-ups. And just this it just took a long time for them to they just started disappearing all the time, and they started making excuses. This person made a bunch of excuses, and they ended up getting fired, but it took like 6 months
Yeah, and that
before they were let go.
I have heard stories about developers who take roles and then they start and then they either are full remote or transition, and they end up basically just collecting a paycheck for 6 months or so. uh, it's sort of it's sort of crazy. Or I have heard of people taking roles and then not maybe they got a better offer down the road or something came through, and that stuff happens, and that's unfortunate. There should be some bit of professionalism, but at the end of the day, do what's best for you. If what's best for you, I'm not saying not to show up and do your job, of course, but I'm saying if a better offer comes along the way and you're like, oh man, sorry, it's an unfortunate situation, but you got to do what's best for you.
Yeah, you at least tell your employer about it.
Mm-hmm.
You don't try to just like collect a paycheck as long as you can working
no.
2 jobs.
No, that's not cool at all.
This person, we actually got their laptop back, and we noticed they installed a program on it that moved the cursor every few minutes. So on Slack, it looked like they were never away. This is how dedicated this person was to trick us.
I did just see that article a little while back about a guy who got fired because he was contracting all his work out on Upwork for like $10 an hour. Or the database administrator that wrote a bunch of scripts that did his entire job for him. Which, I mean, to me, that second part is like, hey,
yeah,
don't hate the player, hate the game. So like, as long as he keeps updating those scripts.
I've heard of developers working in a job and then taking 2 jobs at the same time.
Yep.
And then just trying to balancing them out, working remotely. Like,
so here's part, like, to sort of circle back. I think part of that is, I don't think like developers are innately sort of shady. I think burnout plays a part in that, where you get so you start, like, I know so many developers from previous companies that I've worked at that are just trying to deal, that they just stop caring completely, and you get in this mode where it's just I just gotta survive. I don't care about anything. I wish they would fire me. I don't want to be here. And I think that might be part of it, where people are so they're my old tech lead used to say that we run on gas, and short for give a shits, and and so the business will run you dry in gas, and then when you hit that point, you just start doing things that maybe aren't even part of your character, maybe aren't even part of you. I mean, and you're just miserable, unhappy, but you got family and kids, and you start doing crazy things you never would do. I'm not trying to make excuses, but I am trying to maybe understand how someone could get to that point in their career and do some stuff like that.
That's a bad point. So what do you do if you start going down this road? You start feeling like, oh man, I'm starting to get burned out. You start, your performance kind of wanes a little bit, and you may be the only one that notices it. Maybe no one else even says anything, but you're not putting as much time and effort as you used to. Well, how do you get out of that loop?
So it's a hard thing, and I'm one of those people that is a little bit blunt, a little bit honest, and that makes it easy for me because that's the type of individual I am. So I'm okay telling my manager and my manager's manager that this stuff sucks and this is why, and you're draining me dry. Now, not everyone's going to be okay doing that. That's a really uncomfortable conversation to have with people, especially when, in theory, they're in control of your livelihood, right? And I'm okay having that conversation and speaking about what the issues are. Now, I've done this before on numerous occasions, and sometimes it has an effect. The majority of the time is you get maybe a week of, let's just give them some space, which isn't enough time because it's about changing how things work, changing how it goes. And I've given the talk with, so one thing, one of the best things I saw a company ever did was I had a weekly meeting with my manager for about 15, 20 minutes where we just sit down, talk, what's going on in your mind, how can I help, blah, blah, blah. And for like 8 weeks, I'm saying I'm burning out, I'm burning out, I'm burning out. This is ridiculous. We can't keep doing this. And I remember on that eighth week of being asked to work like but for the next 3-4 weeks to work like 70-hour weeks. And that was when I was like, all right, you know what? I'm not being heard, and there's nothing I can do that's going to change this. And then, sometimes you got to go elsewhere to get that honeymoon period. Now there's other things you can do. But
what about just taking like a vacation for a week?
But
do you think that helps?
I mean, I think it always helps. But here's the thing is, and this goes back to like why people are burning out, is when there's so few important resources that understand what's going on. How are you going to take a vacation? How are you going to be like, yo, I got to take 2 weeks off? Or you're going to be stressed the whole time because the business is push, 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 push. That's another reason people burn out is when are you going to, I've known people who have been literally having phone calls before they're about to give birth.
Wow.
Because they're so dedicated, quote unquote, dedicated to their job because they just are so uncomfortable doing that. And that's sort of the modern world we live in also, where there's no reason you theoretically can't be on the clock 24/7 because we can get a hold of you. So like one way that I've gone about it is I don't have email on my phone. I don't have Slack on my phone. I don't have anything on that. You need me, you got to call me outside of business hours because I'm not available for stupid stuff, because you can probably figure it out. And if you can't, I'm a phone call away and then I'll hop on. And that has been one of the best things I have done. And some people may say that's unacceptable, blah, blah, blah. Look, if it's not big enough deal for you to call me about it, then it's not a big enough deal for me to, stop spending time with my family, doing what makes me happy so that I can show up on Monday rejuvenated and refreshed.
That's a great tip. I know I'm one of those people that even on my days off, sometimes I have Slack on my phone. I'll check like, oh, what's happening at work today? And I know some people that they go on vacation and they still check their Slack, which is, I think, crazy. But they just love their job so much. And I think, gosh, if you're doing that, some people that can do that, but some people are just gonna get burned out. I think most people burned out after a while.
I disagree that they love their job that much. I think they have. So I mean, there is a small majority. I would say the majority of people who are doing that have so much anxiety about their job that they feel they have to do that, which I think is the more likely situation.
It's probably true. Yeah.
Now, I mean, there's of course other ways that you can handle stress and anxiety. There's, all the doctors will tell you, exercise several times a week, eat healthy, get good amounts of sleep. But it's one of those items where, yeah, even if you're doing those things, they can still drain you dry. And so it's not always a physical or how you handle it. Sometimes it's just an environment issue more often than not.
Start a podcast, be able to tell everyone what's happening that they can help too.
Yeah. I mean, burnout's one of those items where it can destroy you. Like I know, that when I started feeling burnout, going home and not working on things, which has been the key, and that's another thing, is like a lot of things that have made you very successful, you'll start to not like and not do anymore, even though you used to enjoy them. That's like when I know that I'm starting to burn out. It's only really happened to me about once in my career, but you have to be aware of these things and see the signs.
When I was going through my period of time where I was burned out of work and I didn't want to do development anymore and I was looking at other things, it actually gave me more motivation to do stuff outside of work. I'm like, my work's going to be 9 to 5. I don't love it, but that's the time where I went and got my MBA and I started blogging. So I guess it was a different type of burnout, but I could see, but then on the other hand, like I've definitely worked a really long, hard week where it's kind of stressful. And then I come home and I'm like, oh my God, do I have any energy left to do some side projects, do my YouTube channel or do a video for a course I'm trying to create. I'm like, oh, I can't do anything because I'm just so like mentally and emotionally drained from the day.
Mm-hmm.
And that starts affecting your work outside. So I could see it kind of both ways.
Yeah, and to me, like the expectation that you're just going to be okay working your 9 to 5, 8 to 5, whatever it is, 40 hours a week, 5 days a week is not an acceptable thing. Like I find it completely unacceptable. If you make me miserable for more than 2 weeks, I'm gone. Like I don't have time for that. I work very hard while I'm at work, but I don't need to be miserable. I'm an adult. Someone treating you poorly and they're not going to resolve it. A company, like to me, it's one of those items that you have to address immediately as soon as you can, because if you don't begin it, what ends up happening is your performance goes down. You start being like, you don't want to be part of that 70% that hates their job. And like that's something that I've hated jobs many a times, and like the job that I hated most was college, like just being a student, and I'm not going back to that. So you got to figure out what works for you, and sometimes it might be a new environment. Sometimes it might be I've asked to change teams before. It's an uncomfortable conversation where maybe it's just the team, maybe it's just changing environments within a company. Maybe it's certain practices. Maybe there are typical ways that you can have conversations to change your direct environment that doesn't always involve leaving an organization.
Could it also be too, I mean, to go back to your point about exercise and eating right, it could be like you just having a really stressful like part of your life. Maybe you have a newborn baby that's keeping you up all night. And so now you have less energy during the day, so you feel more burned out. So you got to kind of keep an eye out. Maybe there's some internal factors that are weighing into your job, to your satisfaction of your job, that might be, because like I know some people, if they miss a meal, they're gonna be grumpy all day long.
Yeah,
sometimes they don't realize that. I'm like, did you eat? Like,
my only sort of counter argument to that is that every company, every company has people who are having children and people who are missing meals, but in software development, it is a rampant issue, and there's reasons for it, and they're outside of the norm,
okay.
right?
Yeah, that's true.
And so, how are we going to fix this? Well, I don't necessarily have a good answer other than maybe being like one book I really highly recommend is the Clean Coder, because it teaches you about professionalism. And now, since I've taken this stance about giving estimates and respecting myself and time and a lot of the things that they talk about, I think that you really have to stand up for yourself in sort of corporate America, because nobody else will. And same thing with like the code base, and like if the developers aren't going to defend the code base and hacking things out, nobody else will. And the only thing that happens is that you'll start to be the one that gets trampled on. And you got to stop it yourself, or it's going to become a major issue in your life and your career. I don't know. I got nothing else to say. I'm sure I could tell some horror stories about burnout, but we've all been there. We've all been with horrible bosses, whether it's in software development, with people with unrealistic deadlines, or people say, "Can't you just add this feature in last minute?" That just keyword, man, it always gets me. All right. I think we've sufficiently burned out this topic, so we'll leave it at that. Hey guys, thanks for watching. If you want to find more about what I'm up to, go to dylanisrael.com.
And if you want to know what I'm up to, you can check out my website at eric.video. If you haven't already, please leave us a 5-star review on iTunes. It really helps us out. And if you do, you might even be featured on our next episode. Don't forget to check out the website at selftaughtornot.com. From there, you can sign up for a mailing list where we give away free courses and a bunch of cool stuff. And we'll also let you know when the next episode comes out. And finally, if you didn't know, we have a Facebook group. It's called Code, Tech, and Caffeine. We have over 10,000 members, and you can find the link at selftaughtornot.com. So come join us. We have tons of developers willing to help you guys, mentor you guys. Check it out. Just make sure you go to selftaughtornot.com and check out the Code, Tech, and Caffeine link. Thanks, and take care.